Steve, application security is a big topic, but you brought up something just a moment ago that I thought was interesting, is that the actual pipeline to create applications is an application in itself. What do you mean by that?
It's been an object of utility there to get something that we've been focusing on from a security perspective, that being the application, to a location that we've been focusing on security, the cloud. But what about the pipeline itself? If we look at some of the supply chain attacks, as we've been called over the past few years, they have been on the pipeline itself. They've been looking for weaknesses in the way that we've been configuring the route to production.
Shift left was a very sort of generic way of saying, look at the pipeline, wasn't it?
Shift left is, in its easiest sense, I think, the return on investment is to get away from looking at production and look at where your automation is centered. And that is, in fact, the pipeline. It's the easiest place to implement security, but it's also something that needs to be secured itself.
What are things that can be more permanently dealt with that doesn't have to be dealt with each time you start a new application?
A very simple one would be having signed commits to your application in GitHub, for example. Most people don't realize that you can use your git config and say you're anybody you want. There are ways where if you are running a GitHub action workflow and you commit a workflow, or for example, in another world, a Jenkins file, and you make changes to that file, it will execute before that change has been actually approved or committed. It will become part of the executable, as we said, application of the pipeline. So when you realize that, you can start to execute attacks on the pipeline, taking advantage of the power and the permissions of the pipeline itself.
The reason you're trying to talk about the whole CI/CD pipeline as an application versus just a series of processes is because you can attach automation here. And when you're doing that, you're actually building an application. Am I right in this thinking?
Oh, absolutely. If you look at let's say a software composition analysis or a supply chain graph of your pipeline, if you're using plugins for Jenkins or you're using GitHub Actions, you're probably implementing some kind of other containerized application dependency that in and itself probably has open source dependencies, which are built on another pipeline, which use GitHub Actions, and suddenly it's turtles all the way down. So there's a whole other world that we need to be thinking about.
So what's your final advice for our audience?
Start by building in a very secure pipeline first. There are open source tools out there. OpenSSF has a scorecard that looks at your pipeline to say, looks like you're doing all the right things. You've got the right number of approvals. We've got secure roads so that our cars can drive to their destination. If you've got a great car and you've got a terrible road, it's still going to be a bumpy ride.
If you want more information on how to secure your pipeline, looking at it as an application, go check out what they're doing at paloaltonetworks.com.